All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be dealing with Chapter 17, Section 2. You should have read this yesterday and did the discussion board dealing with Christianity and some other things. Okay, right here is Europe that we're talking about, this colored area right here, the Western Europe part. This was after the downfall of Rome. The last section should have been about the geography of Europe, this area here. And now we're going to take a look at all these little kingdoms, different kingdoms that are going to pop up after the downfall of Rome because of the chaos. All right, so the big idea is despite the effort of Christians to maintain order, Europe was a dangerous place after the fall of Rome. Christianity is going to play a big part in this section here, and quite honestly, Christianity plays a big part throughout all of the Middle Ages. For the most part, Christianity is the religion of the Middle Ages for Europe. And it's going to spread to Northern Europe through the work of missionaries and monks, so that'll be a big part at the beginning of this section. And then we're going to move on to talk about the Franks, who are going to be led by Charlemagne, and they will create a huge Christian empire and will bring together scholars from all around Europe. And then we're going to take a look at some invaders of much of Europe in the 700s and 800s. So this is during still the early Middle Ages. All right, so for this main idea dealing with Christianity, after the fall of Rome, you're going to have all kinds of different groups that are going to divide this land amongst each other. Right? You can see all these different names here. Here's this kingdom of Odoacer. So this right here was Rome. Odoacer, he was the one that actually took over Romulus Augustulus. You're going to have the Franks right here at the beginning of this time period, because this right here is AD 476. And you're going to see the kingdom of the Visigoths. You're going to have all kinds of different kingdoms. Kingdom of the Vandals down here. So all these are split up into different fights. Okay, all these different kingdoms where they're going to fight for control of these territories. So you can imagine this is just chaotic, leading to a lot of chaos here in the old Western Roman Empire. Now, the creation of these kingdoms is what marks the beginning of the Middle Ages. And like it says right here, it lasts for about 1,000 years. Medieval, that's just a Latin word for middle. Okay, so Middle Ages, medieval times, medieval ages, they all mean the same thing. All right. What we have here is the spread of Christianity. So the orangish color was the extent of Christianity, say, in the 300 time period. Okay, 300 AD. Then this yellow or tanner shade, plus the orangish red, that's going to be how far Christianity has extended in roughly 600 AD. So you can see that Christianity is going to spread through all of the old Roman Empire, all over the old Roman Empire. So you can see how Christianity is going to be such a huge force within the Middle Ages. Now, the most powerful force that's going to help spread Christianity is the Pope. And of course, the Pope located here in Rome. What the Pope is going to do is he's going to send out missionaries. So missionaries are just people that travel throughout an area teaching a religion, speaking of a religion. And they're going to try to convert others to this religion throughout Europe. And you can see it's very successful. Some missionaries will travel great distances to spread this Christianity. So here's Rome. Some are traveling way up here to Britain, others traveling way over here to old Mesopotamia, throughout Africa, and other things. And of course, they're coming into conflict with other religions, Judaism, paganism, the Egyptian gods, the Greek gods, things like that. Now, we're right about 600, so really Islam has not started yet. Okay, remember, Islam's going to start around 610, so we're just about to the point where Islam is starting. But you can see how Christianity is just spreading all over the Mediterranean area. All right, now some of the influential ones that are going to be spreading these religious ideas and things like that, of course, are monks. And monks are religious men. They live apart from society. They're in isolated communities. And they're in isolated communities that are called monasteries. So this would be an example of what a monastery would have looked like at that time period. Monks are very dedicated to their faith, and they will spend their time praying, working, and in meditation. And there were lots of rules that monks had to follow. This is an example of a monk here. This would be an image of Saint Benedict. He is going to be kind of the leader of the monks throughout Europe. He's going to come up with rules of how monks should live their lives. And one of the big things with monks, of course, is that they take a vow of silence, vow of poverty, all that type of stuff. And it's going to become known as the Benedictine rules. And so that's where you get this line called the Benedictine monks. And he was an Italian monk, so he would have been around Rome and those types of places. But most of these monasteries throughout all of Europe are going to follow these rules created by Saint Benedict. And these monasteries they're built all over Europe. So if you go back to that previous map, they're just going to be built all over the place. And usually they're outside of a city, built up on top of a hill or something like that. And these monks would work the farm ground and everything around it. Basically, they were self-sustaining. They were like their own little city where the monks did everything for themselves. So the influence of the monks was very big throughout all of Europe during this time period. Although they were isolated in the communities, they did perform many services. They will give aid to the poor and the needy. They're going to run schools. They'll copy books. So they'll copy down a lot of the religious writings, educational writings, and things like that. And they're going to keep these records. And really, a lot of these things will be stored in the monasteries during war times, and they will be protected. And that's how come we know so much about this time period. They will also run schools, copying these books, but they will collect and save writings from Greece and from Rome. And then, of course, some monks will serve as scribes and advisors for local rulers. So it played a very big part in Rome, or in Europe during the Middle Ages. Very influential. And as it says here, they sometimes act as peacemakers, praying for safety of rulers. They serve as church officials and record keepers, teachers, things like that. So very big part that the monks played within the medieval society. All right, so now we're going to move on to main idea 2 here with the Franks and how they're going to build this large empire right here. You can see in this greenish area. Okay, this was the Frankish kingdom around 748. That was when Charlemagne is born. And then you can see the darker green is what's going to be added after he takes over and then becomes the king of the Franks, roughly until about 814. Now, you can see this is an area where Christianity was spreading. Now, in the 480s, this powerful group of the Franks are going to take over this area called Gaul. And you can remember Gaul, this is what Julius Caesar had conquered back in the BC time period that made him famous. But anyways, Gaul is like pretty much right here's Paris. So you can see it's a lot of what France is today. Now, under the rule of the Franks, they're going to become Christian, very Christian society, and they're going to create one of the strongest kingdoms, largest kingdoms during this new Middle Ages or the early Middle Ages. All right, Charlemagne, he's going to come to power in late 700s. He's this main leader of the Franks. He was not the first, so it was not founded under him. It was actually found under Clovis the Great. But anyway, Charlemagne is a fierce warrior, but a very strong king, admired by everybody around there. Maybe admired because of his ferocity, so maybe more feared than admired. But as a king, he's going to rule over places that we know of today as France, Germany, Austria, Italy, and northern Spain. And as you can see right here is going to be some great accomplishments of his. Expanding the kingdom politically, so that's conquering new territories, issuing money, rebuilding infrastructure, creating new rules, things like that, new laws. But other things, educationally too, he was huge in influencing that people become educated during his time period. And really during Charlemagne's rule, it was seen as kind of a rebirth of education, kind of also as a rebirth of the old Roman Empire. Eventually, he is actually going to be crowned by Charlemagne as the king of the Holy Roman Empire. So a lot of people kind of saw the Roman Empire coming back during his rule. And it has to deal, like this was kind of a high point within the Dark Ages there. But once he dies, his kingdom is split into 3 different kingdoms amongst his sons. And it just kind of goes away after that, because he was such a strong ruler for so long. Once he died, there was nobody that could rule like him. And eventually the kingdom will split back up into different kingdoms and warfare will rise again. But you do need to remember Charlemagne. All right, last thing here is the main idea that the invaders that threatened much of Europe in the 700s and 800s. So, of course, these 3 different groups are going to threaten during the time period of Charlemagne and the other kingdoms from that first slide. And then, of course, after Charlemagne dies, they're certainly going to come in and take over bits and pieces and threaten all those kingdoms. The first ones we're going to talk about, of course, are the Muslims. They're going to pour into southern France and northern Italy. So the Muslims, as they start sweeping across northern Africa, they're actually going to come into Europe and take over parts of southern Spain, and they're going to become known as the Moors Moors. And really, they're going to be a part of that part of Spain for about the next 700 years. You have the Magyars. They're fierce warriors who are going to sweep into Europe. They're going to attack towns and destroying fields. And they're really coming out of Asia, or more Eastern Europe, Asian area, and things like that. And then, of course, you have the Vikings. The Vikings coming down out of Scandinavia, out of Norway, Sweden, Finland that we know of today. And they're going to raid pretty much the northern and western parts of Europe. And they're the ones that are really feared the most because they had great warriors and they used their ships and technology and stuff like that to really put a lot of fear. And what they really didn't want to conquer territory. They would come in real quickly. They would loot the town. They would take women and men as and kidnap them as slaves and things like that. But they would use the rivers. They would attack quickly down the rivers and things like that, and then they would be gone. So the Vikings were pretty much the ones that were feared the most by most of those in Europe. Because they were just vicious. They were very vicious, and they were constantly a threat to the people of Europe. All right, so that's pretty much it for this first part here, 17.2, when we're talking about the early Middle Ages. So please make sure after you've completed watching this video that you take the 17.2 quiz on Schoology. And I hope you guys are doing okay with all of this. Please email me if you have any questions or comments. I know Schoology is tough right now, but keep working hard and doing what you're supposed to do. Hopefully we'll see you guys again soon. Thanks.